welcome. My name is Penny Rosema, and you are listening to the Cookware Manufacturers Association podcast. One of CMA's goals is to keep our members informed. In this podcast, art historian Amy Herman shares some of her expertise in the art of perception. Amy has spent years teaching doctors to pay attention to patients instead of their charts, helping police officers separate facts from opinions when they're describing a suspect, training professionals from a wide array of fields to determine the most pertinent information in any situation. Now, you can find more information about Amy. Just Google Art of Perception, or her website is artfulperception.com. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Penny. It's really nice to be here.
Yes, and I understand your journey to becoming this expert in the art of perception started back when you instituted a program for medical students to improve their observation skills. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Absolutely. I started the program. It was not even my idea originally, and I always like to give credit where credit is due. It was a program that they had at the Yale Center for British Art in conjunction with Yale Medical School. And I was at the Frick Collection here in New York City, and I started a similar program with a medical school in our neighborhood with Cornell Medical School. And one night I was out to dinner with some friends, and I was telling them that medical students had such focused vision. You know, it was all about diagnostics and anatomy. And I'll never forget this because it was such a turning point in my whole program and career. My friend Richard said to me, "Why are you just doing this for medical students? Why aren't you doing this for other people who need good observation skills?" I said, "Like whom?" And he said, "Like police officers, homicide detectives. Why don't you do it for them?" So that was a Sunday night, and Monday morning I called the NYPD and I explained what I did for medical students. I was transferred 7 times, and I finally reached the right person who heard what I was saying. And it's been history since then. 6 months later, every newly promoted captain in the NYPD had to take my class, and it's been growing ever since.
Wow, what a story. What a story.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. It's fun. So give us a little explanation. What is the art of perception, and why is it so applicable to so many professions? Dive a little deeper into that.
Sure. Well, the premise of the art of perception is that I teach people across the professional spectrum in law enforcement and the intelligence community and industry, business, medicine, to enhance their observation skills by learning to analyze works of art. And I know some people, when they hear that, they think that's crazy. What does art have to do with, law enforcement or medicine? But the idea is not looking at works of art. It's rethinking our skills of critical inquiry. How do we ask questions? How do we observe? And most importantly, are we communicating as effectively as possible what it is that we see? And that seems to be the thread that connects all of these professions, from people in business and industry, pharmaceutical and banking and medicine. We all need to be better communicators of what it is that we observe. And I happen to use works of art as the data to do that.
I'm interested in how, the classes or the training that you give works with senior level professionals. Do they tend to think they already have a bead on what they need to know, or are they open, or do you talk a little bit about this application to senior level professionals.
Sure. It sounds counterintuitive that you would want senior level executives to rethink how they observe, but it's frequently people who have been in one particular business or one particular area for a very long time. They've gotten to be very good at what they do, and they're very micro-focused on what they do. And what happens in the process is their vision becomes very narrow. They think about their vision, their strategy, but they never worry about how it's coming across and how well they're communicating. So by taking them into my course, for reasons that I haven't quite figured out yet, art is not threatening to anyone. And yet it's self-revelatory. These senior leaders come through my class and they come out and they say, I never thought about it that way, or I never realized that there might be multiple perspectives. So it's a very non-threatening way to approach senior leaders and say, it's a good time in your career to step back and say there may be another way of looking at vision, strategy, problem solving, mentoring, evaluating, all the skills that good leaders use. And I have a a way to remember all the skills that I use with leaders and what I focus on in the program. And the words are adopt me. And they stand for the words A for assessment. That's what leaders do. They D, delegate. They observe. They're perceptive. They show tolerance. They mentor. And they evaluate. Adopt me. And those are the skills that I work on with senior leaders. And I work with leaders in the military and the intelligence community, and they're very, very receptive to this. I've gotten good positive feedback about a different way to offer training.
Now, do you talk about Adopt Me? If I remember correctly, you have a book that published last May, Visual Intelligence. Do you talk about that in the book, or is that a different topic?
Actually, the Adopt Me is a tailored version of what I talk about in the book.
Okay.
The book is divided into 4 sections, and it's a more general. I have a specific leadership program that's tailored for leaders, but in the book, I talk about the 4 A's. Everybody who takes my class, whether they're in leadership or management or not, practices 4 A's every day, whether it's a new client, a new problem, a new transaction. First, they assess their information. They say, what's going on here? Then they have to analyze that information and say, well, what's important? What's not important? What can I let go? Then they need to articulate it. They send a letter, an email. They make a phone call. They send a text. And finally, they act. They make a decision based on what they observe. So in the book, Visual Intelligence, I really expand upon those 4 A's and how we can be better at doing them in our everyday jobs.
And I'm assuming that book is available on Amazon or Kindles or...
Yes, it is.
All those different formats.
Everywhere.
And you have, we'll talk about this again a little bit later, they probably can reach it through your website as well. I have another question. The topic of negotiation often, I know people talk about how perceptive you are with your counterpart. Do you apply this to the training that you give so people are better negotiators?
I do, but I don't go through it the traditional way. The most valuable class, I am what I like to say is a recovering lawyer. And one of the most valuable classes that I had in law school was the class in negotiations. And what I teach in the art of perception, it's not about always how well you negotiate. And I also remind people that negotiations are not always in a professional context. Sometimes we're negotiating with the person, at the supermarket, or, with our children, or with our partners or our neighbors. We're in constant states of negotiation. And what I explain to the participants is we should be highly aware of body language, facial expression, nonverbal communication, and eye contact. Because if we pay attention to those elements, people speak volumes about themselves without ever opening their mouths. So I devote a big part of the program to looking at works of art and articulating different aspects of body language, facial expression, nonverbal communication, and eye contact. Because as everyone knows, if someone doesn't want to be in the room with you, or if they're bored, or if they're exasperated, and you don't have to be a neuroscientist or a psychiatrist to understand body language and facial expression. And I just explain to people that it's so good to have heightened awareness of these things, and I think it puts us in a better position to be able to negotiate.
Good, very good thoughts. We're talking with art historian Amy Herman, and the topic is the art of perception. Amy, our audiences are probably wondering how our conversation might apply to hidden talents or new employees or miscommunications in, cross-functional teams. Do you have any comments to that?
Absolutely. What I tell each of my classes, most of the people that I work with already have good observation and perception skills. And I find that the consistent breakdown is in the effective communication of what it is that we observe. And when we're talking about working across teams, or sometimes working across cultural landscapes, or from business to business, the means of communication is very different. And so I tell my participants that every word counts, both in speaking and in writing, that we shouldn't use ambiguous language. I'll give you an example. One of the rules in my class is for my 3-hour session, I tell the participants that they should refrain from using the word obviously or the word clearly. And people say, well, we use them all the time. Why should I refrain? The answer is that we live and work in a very complex world. Nothing is obvious and even less is clear. So I'd rather, instead of you saying, well, obviously it's a case of X, what if I don't know why it's a case of X? So I'd rather you say, it appears to me to be a case of X because of Y and Z. So when we're working in business and industry and different areas of specialty, I remind people of the importance of communication, effective communication in writing and in speaking, because that transcends the professional spectrum. Any field you're in, you need to be an effective communicator, especially if you're in a position of leadership.
That one line, avoiding obviously or clearly, is going to stick in my memory for sure. And the counter to that should be, it appears to be, which demonstrates or encourages a conversation, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And you will notice now, Penny, now that we've discussed it, you're going to be so aware how many people use the words obviously and clearly. I hear it on the news all the time. I hear it in places where it's just not appropriate because it is assuming a level of knowledge, education, and insight that may not be there. And I think that effective leaders and managers should be articulate and well explained, and no one should leave a meeting saying, what did that person just say?
Right.
Which we know happens all the time.
Right. And this dialogue helps create a conversation instead of walking away, scratching your head, thinking, well, I should have known that, and I'm not going to ask a question about it. That's very interesting. Now, in the classes and the courses that you teach, whether it's with the police or the medical students or the executive professionals, how do you know your methods are working? What kind of feedback are you getting? Have you done any research? Are you doing reporting? Are people responding to you? How do you know it works?
It's a good question. And when I started with my company, I thought, well, how am I going to know if this works? And a couple of things. I do a debrief session at the end of my program, and I go around the room and I ask people for their short-term and long-term application ideas for what we've just learned. I say to them, can you articulate for me how you think this is going to be useful for you? And if it's not, I have a thick skin, you can tell me.
Yeah.
And all of these ideas that I would have not known because I'm not a member of the professional groups with whom I'm working. So when I hear how police officers want to use it, or shock and trauma nurses want to use it, or, new bank managers, it's fascinating for me, and their anecdotes help inform future classes for me. And that one of the nicest things anyone ever said to me, a deputy sheriff came up to me in North Carolina after a class, and you can imagine there are some skeptics who come to my class thinking, what am I going to learn about art? She's not one of us. What am I going to learn? And the sheriff said to me, Miss Herman, this class really opened my eyes. I said, well, that's good to know, Sheriff. He said, the problem is I didn't know they were closed.
Oh.
And to me, that was very gratifying because when I get feedback like that, I know that it's resonating. And one of the nicest things for me is my clients come back month after month, year after year, and I deal with their new recruits, the new doctors, the new hires, or sometimes the very senior level executives. And that's very gratifying. And that's signaling to me that it's resonating, working, and having its effect in their professional performance.
That is a great quote. You're right. Getting that feedback is very helpful. There's so much emphasis on digital technology, to run a company and a business. Why do you think people are responding to the idea of looking at art to improve their skills? Do you get pushback from millennials or people saying you're not with what's going on? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. I just finished a book called Reclaiming the Conversation, How to Talk in the Digital Age. And I'm a parent, and I'm also someone who relies on her technology a lot. But what the book showed me was that we have to use our technology creatively, that there is no substitution for human interaction. There's just no good substitution. And the best technology that we have is a pair of eyes attached to a human brain. And so I remind my participants, I give them this very, very simple sort of caveat, and I remind them to look up, look around you, because the world has potential for innovation and collaboration and ideas, and if we are so glued to our screens, we're not going to see it. And so I remind people that technology absolutely has its place and that it is, indispensable. That's not arguable. However, I remind people, look up and look around and engage with people around you, because I think that's where the best ideas and the best brainstorming is going to happen. So we need to learn to moderate our use of technology and really figure out how we can use it most effectively and still improve our sense of critical inquiry while engaging in the world around us.
I like the line that you used, use technology creatively.
Absolutely.
Look up the great words of advice. We're talking with Amy Herman. Amy has a website, artfulperception.com. If you have time, take a look at that website. Some great information there, very fascinating stories, and a list of a number of industry and finance companies that she has worked with. So I encourage listeners to check that out. And Amy, I want to thank you for sharing your time and insight here today. Any final words of advice?
Well, I want to thank you very much for having me, and it is to reiterate not only the idea of looking up and engaging in the world around us, but the secondary importance of art, that there's room for creativity in all of our work. And I don't mean creativity in learning to paint or sculpt, but to remind people to always broaden their vision, to envision what their jobs could be, not just what they are.
Wonderful words of advice. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. My name is Penny Rosema, and I'm recording for the Cookware Manufacturers Association. If you'd like more information about Amy, check out her website, artfulperception.com. And we need your feedback so we continue to keep you informed. Was this audio interview valuable to you? Do you have questions or topics you'd like to suggest for future interviews? Let us know. I'm at prosema@cookware.org. You'll find this podcast and others in the member section of our cookware.org website. So look for the link that says CMA Podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the day.